Now, the GameObject class is not the only class associated with every GameObject. Each and every GameObject in the scene also has a transform component, and this is represented in script by the transform class. If I just select the parent object here in the hierarchy panel, you can see that this is the purple sphere here in the viewport. That over in the object inspector, this object has a transform component. And if I select any other object in the scene, you can see from the object inspector that they all have their own transform component. And the transform component keeps track of the position, the rotation, and the scale of an object in the scene. And we can use the transform class to adjust any of these values in script. But these are not the only values that the transform component keeps track of. We can use the transform component to access all of the child objects that are parented to any game object. If I select the purple sphere in the viewport, you can see its name is parent. And if I expand and contract that, you can see that each of the three spheres has been parented to this object. And I can prove that just by selecting the object in the viewport. And when I rotate this sphere, you can see that all the others rotate relative to it. And that is because they have been parented to the object. Now we can access these child objects in script. You will see that I have attached a script to the purple sphere. Here in the object inspector, I have attached parent transforms, and here is the parent transforms C# script. You can see from the object inspector that the script file is completely empty, but we're going to be coding in there now to use the transform component and see how we can access these child objects. So I'm going to jump over to MonoDevelop to do that. So let's bring up the MonoDevelop window, and here we have our parent transforms class. And what I'm going to be doing in the start function is I'm going to be cycling and looping through all of the child objects attached to this game object and just printing their names to the console. In doing this, we're going to see how we can access the transform component of the current object, how we can get the transforms for all the child objects, and also how we can get a reference to all the game object classes of those child objects as well. So we can access the transform component of any object just by using the keyword, just by using the name actually, the class name transform and the period symbol. And when we do that, we get a list of all the methods and properties attached to the transform object. For example, we've got the rotate function that we can use to rotate objects. We're going to be looking at those shortly, but right now I'm just interested in how to access the child objects for this current game object. And we can do that using a for loop. So I'm going to type for int I to begin the integer counter at 0, and I'm going to loop for transform.childCount. Notice the member variable here, child count, which is the number of child objects attached to this current game object. So in our case it is 3 spheres. So child count, and it's going to be I++ to loop through all of those children. So now we have the ability to loop through the children. We can find out how many we have attached to us. But now what I want to do is to get access to the child objects themselves. And we can do that by using transform.getChild. And what this does is it takes an integer parameter, an index of the child that we want to get. So the first child is at 0, the second child is at 1, and the third child will be at 2. So notice that this function, it returns a transform component. It does not return a game object. It returns the component and not the game object. So to get the game object for our child objects, we need to perform another step. So the first thing we're going to do is to get the transform component, and I'm going to store that in a local variable. So I'm going to call this child transform equals transform get child, and I'm going to put in the loop counter I to ensure that we go through the loop and we retrieve each child transform component. To print the name of the game object, we need to get the game object. And of course we can get the game object from any component, as you remember, by using the lowercase game object member. So to print the name of the object, I can type print, and I can type child transform, since this is a component that we retrieved, and I can press period and lowercase g for game object like so, and then I can just put period and name, and that will print the name of the child game object. I'm going to press Ctrl S on the keyboard to save that code, minimize MonoDevelop, and back here in the Unity editor, just switch over to the console, press play on the toolbar, and voila, we have now retrieved all the child objects, sphere 1, 2 and 3, and they've been printed to the console. So there we've retrieved all the children of this parent object using the transform component.